Welcome to Masters of Product Management, a show that gives you real-world techniques and cutting-edge strategies to learn, apply, and succeed in product management. Now, here's the master himself, Stephen Haines.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. You know, I've been doing a ton of research lately about product management, and especially in technology companies. And I keep thinking about the word technology. It resonates through my head because it's everywhere. And sometimes there are some words in business, like leadership, that tend to be blurred when the term is so overused. Because if I think of technology, it could be anything. It could be an app on a phone or a device or a platform as a service. It could be any number of business models. I think about other things. I do a lot of work with banks. I think of banks as gigantic software companies. I was talking to somebody recently at an airline. Airlines are big software companies. And then I see these commercials, like a GE commercial on TV, and they say, oh, we're a technology company, but we manufacture stuff. All right. So tech has been everywhere, and it has been everywhere for eons. And so is the role of product management in technology companies. So from my vantage point, product managers in tech companies focus a lot more on development, and then very, very often in shepherding projects through the development machine. And because there's such focus on that, there's less time garnering market insights and formulating strategies or determining if the products have contributed financial and business results, the kind of things we really want to have happen. This consistently shows up in my research at my firm, Sequent Learning Networks. And I wonder why. And I've been talking to a lot of people, and I recently met somebody who has some great perspectives on the topic. His name is Jeff Metcalfe, and he's my guest on the show today. So Jeff started his career in Silicon Valley in the whole tech startup world during the dot-com bubble. And it's interesting because I was working as a product leader at Oracle in the Silicon Valley at the time. And he's worked on a whole host of in a whole host of industries, spanning high tech, telecom, auto, and currently he's bringing his knowledge of technical product management to Atom. It's a big data and tech company in the real estate industry, and it's based in Irvine, California. So Jeff, welcome to the show.
Great. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so glad to have you. You know, when we were talking the other day, I get a sense that there are product managers who work in tech companies, and then there are these tech product managers, and you drew a distinction that I thought was really interesting. And I was hoping you could help our listeners understand this difference.
Sure. Well, when I think of product management, I've kind of identified two different camps of people that are product managers. So on one hand, there's what I call the business product managers, and these are the people that kind of do P&L and maybe a little bit of marketing, and they kind of look at things from the business side, but they look over the wall to technology, and it's not something that they want to get into or involved or interact with. And then there's technical product managers that really view the technologists as one of the departments that they really need to align to and understand. And I think that distinction is important, because without an understanding of what technology does and what it brings to the business in so many different ways, as you were just talking about with the airlines or the banks, these businesses are technology-enabled businesses. You're not going to run a big bank without technology. You're not going to run an airline without technology. And I'm not even just talking about avionics type technology, but much more pervasive and cross-industry is servers, applications, an understanding of the cloud. And if you're reluctant to get to really kind of jump into that stuff and understand it, you're going to be missing a critical piece that's going to inform all of the rest of your business and product strategy.
Sure. I agree with you. And my point of view is that, and I've spent a lot of my corporate years in advanced technology companies. Now, I'm not a technologist, but I always had to be conversant in the foundational technologies that were being used, so I can at least have a conversation both with my developers as well as conversations with customers and other people. I think that you can have both. Do you think that this is an imperative for people who are business product managers to have a healthy dose of this domain?
Yeah, I guess that I would look at it like this. If you're going to travel to a foreign country, understanding some of the, how to say please, thank you, ask where certain things are, it's practical, conversational, and conceptual understanding of how to interact with the people in that country, and it makes your visit much better. I think that working with technologists is the same thing. Nobody's asking a product manager to jump in and start writing scripts or understand how to write code, but understanding what your business logic layer does, or what an n-tier architecture means, or and even adopting some of the cultural paradigms of a technical group allows you to align to them or partner with them and work with them to develop better technical strategies, and all of that manifests in what you bring to market in your product.
Do you think it can work both ways as well? So, for instance, you're suggesting that product managers acculturate to the development community, but do you think that it's also the imperative of the product manager to help bring technical people into the world of business?
Yeah, and I don't think that that's a bad thing to do, for sure. But when you look at the personality types of people that become product managers, they tend to be a lot more extroverted than data people or code people who are heads down and more introverted. So you're probably not going to see a lot of technologists jumping up and down about speaking in front of people or having these working sessions with executives. That's really the role of the product manager. But that said, as I'm talking with my tech team about why we're doing certain things or what information I need about the performance of an API, or how to structure the functionality so that I can price that to account for costs and things like that. I always take the time to say, well, I need to be able to do this so that I'm able to sell it profitably, or so that as I talk with the executive team, they understand what the strategy and what the roadmap is. So I give the business background to it, and they're smart people, but it's I guess maybe a little bit of a difference where I may go sit in a Scrum meeting or a how-to session or a planning meeting on the tech side. I'm not expecting technologists necessarily to come and sit in a roadmap meeting with executives. That's not necessarily their environment. It isn't that I haven't invited technologists to do that, but it's just a different paradigm. And I think more extroverted personality adapts better that way, if that makes sense.
Would you say that in technology companies, especially with respect to products, that the companies tend to be more development process centric or more market focused?
I think that in my anecdotal experience, it's case by case. I think that I think that you really need both, right? You've got to understand your market, but you've got to have good disciplines around development. And I think where either of those have broken down, I've worked in companies that either A, didn't understand who their customer was, or B, they didn't track things to understand which customers were good customers. But on the development side, they did things like try to manage Scrum out of Excel spreadsheets. That's not the right discipline to do there either. So I think that it's kind of, if you're asking me to pick which discipline you have to have, I think it's both.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think it not only applies to technology companies, but it applies to any company, because the product people really have to have sufficient familiarity with the domain and the product and everything else that is associated with the business of the product. But so within the context of all of this and the fact that product managers need to really understand the culture, almost anthropomorphically, of the development community where they work, are there any other characteristics or behaviors that you think are critical for product managers in tech companies?
Yeah. So I like to start with the data. And that sounds kind of geeky. But when you look at a database and you look at the kind of data that's floating around, that's business critical. And when I worked in payroll tax, that was things like, employers' EINs and the employees that worked there and the type of employee they were and how they categorized their work sites and how the withholding codes worked and what the tax codes worked and how that manifested in the database, and understanding that. I didn't need to be able to redraw the database architecture, but just kind of going through and asking questions about the data and then how we process that data in a practical way, right? So in real estate data, where I'm at right now, I did kind of the same thing. What are the key correlating records? How do we tie things together? What are our customers looking to get out of the database, and how are we providing that? What's our go to market mechanism, and how are we pricing that? How are we solving customer needs? It kind of, there's these parallel themes that run on the technology side that mirror what the business needs to do, but understanding what the technology is and not being afraid of it, but being willing to ask a lot of questions, finding technology stakeholders that are willing to sit down, and most of them are, to say, well, here's what we have, or here's how this works, or here's how we accomplished this requirement for the business or another business objective. Here's how we're tracking KPIs, understanding the technology at those levels. And you really just need to get to a good conceptual level of what's down there, what's under the hood. But once you have that, it strengthens everything that you have in terms of what's happening on the business side.
You're listening to Masters of Product Management with Stephen Haines from Sequent Learning Networks, sequentlearning.com.
I'm a non-technical person who always worked in advanced technology companies. And there are a couple of things that I thought were really important, especially because I was dealing a lot with business process automation. And that was, number one, a high degree of humility in terms of approaching the technical community so that they can help educate me, right? Because that's where your on the ground education is. And the other thing had to do with just the basic follow the electrons. Like, can you tell me how things move around, right? Because if it's not innate to all of us, you sort of want to be able to say, how do you take the black box and create, a conceptual understanding? Because that's another way to communicate to other people in the company. Can you comment not on necessarily on the electrons, but on the humility aspect?
Oh yeah, and I remember we were talking about this the other day, and it just really is so true. Like I wear my Converse, my jeans to work every day, and I've got my button up, but I mean it's I'm able culturally to look and feel the part of a technologist, go sit down and really just blend in with that culture a little bit more. It's not that it makes me a coder, but for most of the days when I don't have that customer facing aspect of my job and I don't need to wear a suit, I try to culturally adapt to what technologists are doing within the company, be part of that group effectively, make them feel as though I'm allied with them, because I am. On days when I need to go out to the field, meet with customers, obviously the dress code's different, but there's a lot to be said for how you present yourself to these different groups. And working within technology, it's such a multiplier to the value that I can bring to the company to have a good working relationship with them specifically, that it makes it worth my acclimating into that environment and not coming with I know better than you, or I'm telling you how the business needs it, but more of a collaborative, look, I'm part of you. I dress like you. I come to you for ideas. Let's collaborate. We need to accomplish this thing as a business goal, but I don't have all the answers. What do you guys think? And I guarantee you'll get some great minds that are going to be partnered with you on solving some of those problems. That's
marvelous. That's a really marvelous perspective. And I hope listeners really take that to heart in terms of their own adaptation and adjustment inside of any organization in which they work. Now, there's another topic, and I had talked to you about having this discussion before, and it has to do with roles and responsibilities, but mostly about product managers working in an environment that's using an agile or an iterative approach to software development or other kind of development.
Yeah.
But we talked about the role of a product owner versus a product manager, and for a little bit of context, there is so much variation across the entire universe of technology, large complex companies to very small companies. And you have people who wear one hat, they wear two hats, but there's so much variability. Is there some perspective that you can offer to the listeners that talk about these different roles and how they should be divided up?
Well, I hope so. I'll give you my opinion.
Okay.
So starting in tech startups, you wear 7 hats. That's kind of the job description, and what hats you wear just sort of depends on what your role is. For me, I've always kind of described what I've done as this marrying up of product management and the strategic direction of the products in the company on one side, and the project management or the tactical planning and execution on the other side. And for me, it's very fluid and intuitive. It's not a fox guarding the henhouse kind of scenario. I understand that the ideal environment is when these two sides work together. Mm-hmm. So for me, when I look at Scrum, which I've been running Scrum teams since the late 90s, really when Scrum first came on the scene in Silicon Valley and we were adopting it. And over the years, it's grown. And I think one of the unfortunate things about that is the development of the title product owner, which, as I've kind of come to understand what that is, I have my product owner certification, and that's great. But to me, it's really a interesting project BA type of a role where the product owner works with a product manager who understands the strategic, but the product owner role is kind of relegated to this, let's manage the stories in whatever system you're using, to manage your Scrum disciplines, and figuring out how much scope and capacity we have within the sprint, and working with, if you have a Scrum master, but sometimes companies roll the Scrum master and the product owner together, so it's kind of this BA role and writing the acceptance criteria and the stories, and kind of this project management role. So it really gets vague, and I guess I would say that you can't hire a product owner or staff a product owner role and really expect it to be strategic. I think that it really kind of gets to this, it convolutes what businesses are trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. There's some things I've done in the past in terms of my research. And in one company, a woman who was running a product team in a financial services company. It's a larger company, but she was working in a smaller subsidiary. And as she was adopting this, she recognized that they needed the product manager and the product owner. And she really didn't like the word product owner. She had a great word for it. She called it product emissary to the development community, because the product manager really had the business and the just all the different dimensions of the product, vision, strategy, goals, performance, working with all the other departments, as we would see as a sort of a typical product management role. But this other emissary to the development community had to sit in the same room or the same cube as the product manager, because they needed to carry the same message. And one of the things that I've learned, and this is more recent than anything else, is that if we use user stories as a scenario, and we have lots of different user stories, and we put them I sort of portray them as chapters in a book, how can we ensure that there's direct messaging between these stories and the value proposition that needs to be developed? And how can we thread all of these things together so everybody has a common perspective of what are we trying to do and how, and so that if there has to be a tactical role, sort of shuttling things through the development community, there remains that context, and you get away from just feature prioritization and things like that. Though you're really focusing on making better decisions about the product as a business and getting more people into that game. Does this resonate as something relevant to you?
Oh, absolutely. And it happens all the time. So let's take a practical example. So as a product manager, I might write something like a business plan, go-to-market strategy, document what my revenue goals are, the things that I need to understand about cost, revenue, profit, things like that. And then as those get presented to the development community, one thing I would stress is that even if there's a product owner, BA, project manager, scrum master that's working with the product manager, it's really important to maintain that regular and high level connection with the development community, so that those strategic goals are directly conveyed to, and you feel like the partnership extends from the product manager all the way through to the development community. But once those goals are understood and prioritized that come out of your, here's the plan, here's the roadmap, now you can write things like user stories, acceptance criteria. In many cases, in the projects I've worked, it's required deeper things like sitemap planning, technical architecture, schematics, these types of things that get drawn, Visio diagrams that you export as PDFs. You can attach those to the story. But those are all things that you can do as a product owner, where the product manager needs to focus on the business and the strategic. The product owner essentially offloads a lot of that and can consume that heads down, more detailed technical work, development of specific acceptance criteria, answering technical questions the developers have, and maintaining that conduit of information. But it's all tied up in priority to what you've outlined in your roadmap, your strategic planning, and the understanding of where you're going it's not them over there. It's not the people up in the ivory tower. It's that guy who's the product manager who's working with us, the development team, that's very transparent, outlined, and the rigor that you can put around the project management then can really be tight and understood. There's less fire alarms. There's less 11th hour fixes. You can put a good quality project management process on top of that can be iterative depending on your product. If it's a shippable, you can put waterfall. It just depends on what the right methodology is that you need to use. But it all comes into a very nice alignment when you approach it that way.
Yeah, that is very well put. And I want to be cognizant of our time together today, because there's a lot to be told here. And I think there are going to be more chapters in our own book on product management in technology companies, because technology again is everywhere. It's with us morning, noon, and night. It's literally living in our own genetics. And what I've also seen is that product managers, regardless of the industry in which they work, still have to be responsible for garnering market insights and strategic planning and getting stuff out the door and making sure that the product investments are delivering the ROI. What I don't want to see have happen is product people getting sucked into the vortex of development, design, and other facets of technologies, because they may end up seeing the trees, but they're going to miss the forest. And so every product manager and everybody on the team needs to know the products, understand the foundations of the technology and the domain, and keep their eye on the store. And I think there's a terrific opportunity here. So I hope you'll all continue the journey with me on Masters of Product Management. And we'll see you next time.
This has been Masters of Product Management with Stephen Haines, but it doesn't end there. Just visit sequentbusiness.net to take advantage of free tools and resources and subscribe to the show. That way, you'll never miss an episode. It's all there at sequentbusiness.net. We'll talk to you next time on Masters of Product Management. Learn, apply, and succeed. Sequentlearning.com